I just wanted to get back over to ham radio a little bit. This is a G90. Everybody knows what this is. Love these radios. I've got 2 of them now. We'll probably end up adding more, but they're just handy. They're small. They do a lot for what they are. So, biggest problem is powering these things for me. You know, a lot of people go out and buy all these different batteries. But I was thinking, I have a boatload of these batteries. I've got them for my tools. I have them all over the place. I tend to buy a lot of that kind of stuff because when I'm using my tools, I'd rather have enough of these to last a full day if I need to, doing whatever I'm doing. So I've got a 3D printer, and this is what I came up with. So this is one of the things that I used to do is I've made a few of these little adapters, and I always use these. So these little spades would stick through there, and I've never really liked them. They work okay for some stuff. You know, if I'm just powering some lights or something like that, which I've done that too, they work okay. I just don't like them. They're kind of chimsy. I usually don't use the red ones. I use the blue or the yellow ones, but you get the idea. The little spade would stick into the contact, and you could run a wire out, but I never really liked them because you know, they're chimsy. I don't like them. So I ordered some of this off of Amazon. Right there. It's just 040, I think it's 18 gauge copper. And what I did is I 3D printed this as a guide. So all I did is take a Sharpie, lay over top of this, and it's not as wide as I'd like. I've actually got some sheets coming that are a little bit bigger. So my plan is to make some. You can see a slot here, and you can see down in there's the copper. It doesn't quite make it all the way out. What I'd like to be able to do is have some copper pieces like this, but that will actually come out this side as well. And then on, if you look at it, it'll go there, and it gives me a Anderson power pole connector. And what I've got here, just to hide it, so I've got a little screw going in there that's holding that in place. So there's no glue or anything on here. I've soldered these to the copper here, and then I've got this little cover that just snaps right in place, and you can see where it rests. But essentially, the way these little copper pieces are in there, they don't move at all. They're great. They stay right where they're at, and they're held in place in both axes. So this is kind of holding them down. That's kind of holding them there. But what I'd like to be able to do at some point, so I'm going to make a few more of these, but I'm going to have some mount holes here, 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 and here. And then if you have these where a piece sticks up through here, so essentially I would still have this. This would stick up through a little bit, so you'd have protruding copper that comes up, and then essentially terminals that you could connect to for other devices. Maybe I want another set of these that come off of this, or maybe I want a cigarette lighter or a USB charger or whatever that I could just put on the battery, and when I stick it on the battery, you have your Anderson power poles, and then maybe USB-C and all that up top as well. So that'll be another revision. But what I was making this for in particular is my G90. So I'm actually going to mount this to the body of my G90. I'm going to use some double-sided tape for a couple of reasons. However hot this gets, the double-sided tape will hopefully act as kind of a thermal barrier to keep the heat off of this. And then I just made a little jumper for this. So if this is mounted here, I can take my battery and put it there, and it'll just be kind of a portable unit, and then it powers the radio just fine. I've used it multiple times, so you can see 12.2 volts there. These will work all the way down to, you know, like 11 volts or something. And I've operated this at 20 watts multiple times on a 4 amp hour battery, and you get a pretty decent amount of time with one of these batteries. So again, it's a battery that I already have. Just to go portable, it's a real quick and dirty solution to powering these little radios, and among other things. You can power all kinds of other stuff too. But this is just my first version of it, my first prototype. But I think it turned out pretty darn good. Now I've got these Hercules, but this actually works. I've got a buddy that has DeWalt batteries, and I made this adapter to where it will work with either or. So I can plug my Hercules battery into it. I can also take his DeWalt 12 volt batteries and plug into it. So, you know, I borrowed one of his batteries, and like if you look, some of them have these little tabs right here, and on the other side I think they've got one. So these will not work in a DeWalt tool, but because I was sort of designing that from the ground up anyway, I went ahead and set it up to where it would work for either one. So it works for DeWalt, works for Hercules, works for either one. And you've got some mounting holes here. If you use like a wood screw, it'll screw right in. I've got it where it clicks in pretty tight. Don't have a lot of wobble to it. It fits pretty tight to the battery. So you can see where it's pretty decent. I mean, I didn't get this edge, but I didn't really want to deal with all that. But and you can also, it's kind of cool, if this is on your thing, you can check your battery just by hitting that and it's facing you. So that's kind of my plan, is for that to sort of live on it just like so. So you've got, you know, very short leads, 12 gauge wire to this, and you've got everything you need. I'm probably going to make a jumper like this with a fuse in line at some point. I just hadn't done it yet, but I just made that real quick to have a way of testing it. But I don't know why I've never thought about pulling the copper like this and doing that, but you know, that was like 20 bucks or something for a roll of it. But how many of these will I be able to make with that? My intention is actually to make a bunch of stuff that use these style batteries for all kinds of stuff. One of them being something like this. You know, these these grinders like this, they're handy as they can be. But man, what if you had a little battery on the back that you could plug in and you could take that with you? I've got a truck that I generally work out of a lot, do a lot of stuff with, and having something like this where I don't have to have 110 would be really handy. So I'm going to do one of those, probably build me like a die filer. I don't know if anybody's used those, but like a little die filer machine that uses a battery like this where I can just clip it in. Another thing that I'm doing is I'm going to, right here in the center, I think what I'm going to do is put a laptop power supply jack, like just a female plug right there. Essentially, the reason I'm going to put it there is if you're using the battery, you cannot, it blocks that from being used. So you can't, you know, if you had the power port over here, for instance, and you plugged it in, it could actually blow your battery up. So if I put it here, then I could plug into it and it would actually adapt 12, 20 volts, whatever it is. I might even put like a buck boost converter or something like that in one of these. Obviously, it'd have to be bigger than this. But set it up to where you could power it with a battery or with one of those things. I've got a couple of buck boost converters that I bought that seem to work pretty well. I've even considered having it set up to where you could use a 12 volt or you could use a 20 volt battery and do the same thing. So I either will have a separate 12 volt and 20 volt battery section, or I don't know if I can, but I might see if I can make it where it'll take both in the same slot. But I also want to do a dual battery deal. So essentially set it up to where you have one battery here and then maybe a second battery that you can put in, and you would be able to hot swap them. So essentially you could have a battery powering something like this, and then you could, say that battery is going bad, you could pop one in here and then take that one out, and you never lose power to the device that you're running. The only thing I've got to figure out is how to keep the one battery from trying to charge the other. So it'd be something like a diode of some kind to keep the voltage from feeding back to the other battery. But if I did that, then essentially you'd have two battery, positive and negatives would be parallel, and you would be able to just use either socket to essentially power something. And I could even have those sockets to the inside, so you could plug one in and you could plug in something else like a laptop deal. But I figured for simplicity, this is a very simple, kind of clean setup to give me battery power for a ham radio like this. And I've even got one of these mounted to my wall in my ham shack, to where I've got one of those, it's like a 12 port Anderson power pole distribution block. Well, I've got one of these with a short lead that I can plug from that into that and actually run any of my other radios with these in a kind of a disaster scenario. I don't have power. I can clip those in and use any of my radios that I've got connected. So I can use my 2 meter or my forget the other one. But obviously this one sips battery compared to like my 991 or my 710 or some of my other radios. This one's just real easy on a battery. So it just seems like the perfect candidate for something like this. This doesn't really add a lot of bulk to the radio. It's just going to sit there and be there, and it just gives me a socket that I can clip a battery into and run it. You could run it almost like a man pack or something if you wanted to. I do wish, with this being a 20 watt radio, I wish they would just put a BNC connector on the back of these. I don't know why they went with this. Maybe there's a reason. I guess they're okay, but I've just kind of standardized to BNC for everything that I do. So I just buy a bunch of these adapters and I just pretty much immediately stick them on whatever I've got. I don't run anything over 100 watts. Not that I wouldn't. It's, the expense to me isn't worth it to go any more than that. And a lot of the reason I'm doing ham radio is more, I enjoy the antenna design and stuff like that. So a lot of what I'm doing is just, okay, how can I take something like this and use it well? And a BNC port, it's just quick, and I don't really do a lot of more permanent. I just set me up an office in the house, and I've kind of got a little ham shack started where I've got, mounted radios and things like that are a little bit more, I guess, not portable. But for some reason, I've always been fascinated with taking stuff with me. I want to be mobile. I've always been that way since I was a kid. Just something I always have done. So I've always liked being able to take things with me, and smaller things like this. And as useful as these little radios are for what they are, you really can't beat them. And I'm looking at getting an X60, a 6200 possibly for my motorcycle, to keep with me, because this is a little bit bigger than that and all that. And, you know, even with that, something like this would be really handy. Having a little adapter where I could power the X6200 with something like that, I thought it would give you that extra oomph. I think it'll do, what, 4 or 5 watts with the internal battery, and this will bump you up a little bit to, what, I think 8 or 10. So having something like that would give you a very easy, quick 4 amp hour 12 volt battery. They're not really that expensive. I know the people at Harbor Freight here pretty well, and they've been really good about warranting these batteries. If they go bad for any reason, they've taken care of me. Of course, I've spent a fortune at Harbor Freight. You can pretty much look around and there's a million things from Harbor Freight in my shop. But anyway, I just thought that was neat. I'm going to do a bunch more 3D printed stuff. The funny part is, I have big machines like this that I use, and they're awesome. But I'm kind of going back to smaller machines a little bit here lately. I've been going back to, you know, machines like this. I'm actually going to move this into my house. And my office is basically becoming like a miniature version of what I've got out here. And I'm not going to get rid of this. This is awesome. I use this stuff all the time, and it's fantastic. But a lot of times I'm, you know, not dressed, and I'll have an idea and I just want to go make it. And so now that I've got my office, I can do a lot of that stuff. So I've got a couple of 3D printers. You know, I've got these in here, but I don't use them anywhere near as often as I use the ones that I've got in my house, just because those are accessible when I'm in my pajamas. I can just go in there and make something. So I've started kind of doubling up on some of this stuff. I'm probably going to get another little Harbor Freight mini lathe and keep in there for certain things. But, you know, not that I'll ever replace these. They're awesome. This machine's been fantastic. But I also like having the smaller versions of stuff. So either way, I just thought that was interesting. Another little ham radio project that I started doing. Again, I like portable. I like POTA and stuff like that. Not that I don't really care about making contacts with people around the world or any of that. I'm more, I guess, more of a non-random contact type person. I want to see what I can do with this with people in my local area. So I'm kind of focusing more on invis, quick to deploy antennas, things like that, just to see more of a disaster scenario. How can I do quick and dirty comms, I guess, to get to people if I don't have any cell phone service. But either way, just thought that was interesting. You guys have a great day. Bye.